everyone, and welcome to Montessori 101, a live show from Child of the Redwoods, all about the magic of Montessori. We believe that every child deserves a Montessori education. I'm Aubrey Hargis.
And I'm David Hargis. So whether you're live, hello out there, we see you, or you're watching the replay, or maybe you're listening to this as a podcast, whatever, we're just happy to have you with us. To learn more about our work, go to childoftheredwoods.com.
All right. Well, today we are diving into, I think you said is this our last?
This is the 21st and final.
Oh my goodness.
Essential. When did we start this series?
I don't.
December or January?
Yeah, November maybe? I don't know.
It's been a while.
Anyway, it has been a long time. So we've gone through all 21 of our Montessori essentials that we looked through our primary and lower elementary content and decided these are the 21 things that you would want or need in order to go through the Montessori curriculum from age 2.5-ish to 6-ish or even 9. Yeah.
With an emphasis on DIY or common things.
Yeah. So today's very last essential is globes. So we're going to talk about, you're going to want a globe at home, and we've got options, and I can't wait to talk about options. And if you're curious about what the other things are on that 21 essentials list, you can grab your own free copy, as always, on our website at childoftheredwoods.com/essentials.
All right. Ready?
Yeah, let's jump in.
Okay. Now, I am fairly confident that everyone in the audience will know what a globe is. We usually start out with a definition, and this is one of those where it's pretty straightforward, right? It's a 3D representation of a planetary body, like often the Earth, but or sometimes an area of space. There's some really cool globes of the moon and Mars. There are globes or globe-like things. I guess there would still be globes that show star fields and constellations.
What is a globe-like thing?
It's in the shape of a globe, but it's not of the Earth.
Okay.
I think those are still technically globes. Let's go into the semantics.
Alrighty, yeah.
Anyway, so there are lots of kinds of things that are globes, but what we're talking about are Earth globes.
Okay, yeah, basically Earth.
Now, here's something that I think a lot of people don't remember or they don't realize, and that is that humans have known that the Earth was round since 1492. Sorry, it's the 3rd century BCE. That's right. It goes really way back. That's right. They used math, the kind of math that we would teach to our kids today in geometry and others. So they knew that for a long time, and they actually started making globes not long after that. So we don't have any, as far as I know, globes that date back from the 2nd century BCE.
Oh, that's amazing. Even think about what would they have made them out of?
I'm not sure.
Stone?
Well, they don't. Yeah, they right. So we have depictions of them. I have descriptions of them. There's artwork sometimes that will show a globe-like object, and there's other evidence, but none exist. I think the oldest globes we have do go back to the 15th.
I'm imagining really round stones.
Yeah, or maybe a leather that's painted.
Okay, that would be cool.
Yeah. Anyway, it's amazing. Now, what I think is especially amazing about this is that if you are like many of us, you were taught that when Columbus and those age of explorers were out, some people thought they were going to fall off the edge of the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear this?
I did. I was taught that in grade school.
And it's a lie. That's a myth. Most people, as far as I understand, did not think the world was flat. Everybody from about the 3rd century BCE on more or less knew that the world was round. They didn't know how big around it was for sure. They didn't actually, they were pretty precise actually. They didn't know what was on the other side of the horizon, of course. Like, is it just open water? Is there some more territory? Who knows? But no one thought they were just going to float along and then fall off the edge of the Earth like on a map. And it just wasn't there. In fact, it was that myth was made up in, I think it's largely attributed to the late 19th century, mostly by people who wanted to paint pre-scientific revolution, like medieval people and before, like pre-Enlightenment folks, as simpletons who would just believe in anything. Coincidentally, it emerged around the same time as Darwin's theory of evolution. So there's a lot to unpack there in terms of like why this myth emerged and what that means in our like the war on science and what the war of science in other ways, and how that kind of gives us misconceptions about how people's beliefs and understanding that continue.
And feelings about Columbus as well.
Totally. But we will leave it at that to say that it's one of those things that is interesting about the world that is probably that many of you might believe that is actually not true, and it's actually propaganda.
Well, as from the Montessori perspective, thinking about our whole lower elementary curriculum, we focus, it's very scientific what we teach, but we teach it through the kind of mythological viewpoints or through storytelling.
That's right.
So that kind of resonated with me when you talk.
Well, it makes sense.
Like it
sure,
doesn't have to be either or,
Well, that's right.
Either science or myth, right?
That's right.
They can come together.
There's a didactic
we
quality.
can have an appreciation of all of the stories that humans
and
tell.
I think, and I don't, this is not really necessarily about globes, although there is actually a connection to it. But at least in the modern Western world, we tend to draw a really hard line between myth and the role of myth and the role of science and fact. That's not actually true to how humans live their lives. It's a false dichotomy for it, and it creates this idea that you can't have both.
There'd be an example of binary thinking.
Exactly. Right? Which is not ideal. So what you really want is creative, open, questioning thinking, and that's going to lead you to realize, as Montessori, when she writes about the fundamental needs of humans, obviously she was a doctor, she was a scientist, but she also knew that humans needed art, they needed myth, they had vanitas, self-love, they needed spirituality. All of these things are part. If you look at any human culture, you're going to find a variety. And so I think to kind of take that to the idea of the globe, right? The globe, when we look at a globe, we think, okay, this is a scientifically accurate representation of the thing, and so it must be true. But in reality, the globe, maybe the proportionality of the globe or where the water is versus the land, that might be accurate. But the lines that we draw on it, the colors we painted, that's totally made up.
Well, it's still based on whatever our perception is,
totally,
right?
Exactly.
And we, so I'm assuming like in earlier versions of globes, they were less accurate according to our current perception, because we could only measure what we could imagine it to be, what we could physically witness it to.
Well, we didn't actually. Right. Remember, no human had seen the Earth in totality until we went to the moon.
Right. And so now we have satellites up there. They're taking pictures all the time. Exactly. So it feels to us when we look at a globe, we kind of assume that it's like perfectly accurate.
Right.
But we're still using technology that we are developing based on our own perceptions.
Yeah.
It's just like it's still perceived.
Yeah, and that we're putting some level of faith into, whether we want to admit it or not. So it's very interesting. Actually, that leads me to the question I really wanted to ask you, which is, so in the internet age, it's great. Like you can go find a 3D visualization of the Earth, right, like that, on a multitude of devices, and you can manipulate it. You can even buy special goggles and things that let you feel like you're standing like the giant of giants in a, moving the Earth around in your hands.
Yes, we have done that VR experience.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing.
It's really cool.
Is that the same thing as having a physical globe?
Well, obviously not.
And I don't mean like, this is another semantics question. I don't mean literally, but I mean
okay, so Google Earth.
We're starting over. This is it.
I love Google Earth.
Sure.
Right. I mean, I love it. And Google Earth isn't the only globe simulator out there. It's just, I think, the most famous. But I really love it because you can just, with the click of your mouse, you can just like scroll around the Earth, maybe even on a mobile device or
a tablet or something.
Tablet. You can use your finger and just like swipe it around.
Or
and
spin the globe. Yeah.
Yes, and turn it this way and that. And the other thing I love about it is that it will simulate the sun's light shining.
Yep.
So you can see what's shadowy and what is
Yep.
in the bright light. So you can really tell, like, North America, where we live, is sunny right now, but on the other side of the earth, you can tell that it's dark. I mean, I really, really love a lot of those attributes.
Absolutely. They're really great. But
it's not enough when we're working with children.
no. And so we would definitely say that when you're for the lower elementary kids, especially, I know in our study of humankind, we do ask you to use, or we have lessons related to using Google Earth or other technologies, but it's a very different experience than actually the tactile. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but there's something about that tactile experience that is really essential. And there's actually a lot of classic Montessori lessons that are specifically about the tactile.
That's right. Yeah.
You ready to talk about some of those?
Yes. I guess I just wanted to say that that David and I are not ever opposed to using technology.
Totally.
And in Montessori, some of you may have heard that Montessori is anti-technology. It actually isn't. On the other side, you may have heard that there's an app for everything Montessori, and there isn't. Montessori, really, we look at what the technology serves us and what developmental stage of the child is ready to learn that particular skill. So as far as the Google Earth or whatever goes, I mean, I think you can share that with any age child.
Sure.
But what really helps first is to introduce the concept of what a planet is, and also what the planet Earth is, because that is the home that we live on.
That's right.
So that's actually a really big theme of the primary curriculum. And I know that the friends who are watching, those of you who are in our primary class right now, we will get to that subject when we get to cultural. And I know we're a little bit further away from that. This will just be a little deep dive into it. But we really try to make everything a sensorial experience right away. And so when it comes to something like teaching children about the place where they live in a traditional classroom, the way you usually do that is you kind of have like an all about me unit, and you learn the people who live in your neighborhood, like the mail carrier and the grocery store clerk, and I don't know, the firefighters and police officers, whatever kind of people are the helpers in the neighborhood. And those are all wonderful things to learn about your neighborhood too, but it doesn't really answer the child's first question of like, where am I?
Yeah.
And in Montessori, it's very unique that we actually try to answer that question right away as soon as children, even before they ask, really, we're just like giving them the opportunity to ask that by putting globes into their hands.
Yeah.
And in the Montessori primary classroom, the land and water globe, which we'll talk about what to do with in just a sec, that is actually one of the first kind of experiences that we give children that children might see in the classroom. Often children are kind of drawn to the globe area of the classroom because there's a lot of bright colors and shapes, and it's interesting. And if we can share with our children the concept that we actually live in an area that may be lush and green, or it may be, dry and sandy, whatever our environment looks like, what we're actually doing is we're like standing on something that looks similar to, but is not exactly a sphere. That concept, when children like get it, that aha moment, it's astounding. It's just like something just like explodes in their brain, and like all of a sudden, like they're open to so many more abstract ideas after we introduce that one concept. And until then, children, especially little toddlers and young threes, they might not be quite ready to make that abstract leap yet. But we don't let that stop us from introducing the concept of the globe.
That's right.
And we never really know exactly when they will have that big aha moment. Aha, I live on a planet. It's called Earth, it has all of these different landforms on it, We don't really know when exactly that's going to happen inside each child's brain, but we do know that if we prepare the environment in a way that exposes them to those concepts, then one day it will click, it'll sink in, they'll have this big aha moment inside, and you may or may not know that it's happened because children are very, very mysterious. Yes, they are. But once they do understand that concept, they often become just enraptured with the idea of being a member of this planet, being one of not just one person in a family, but one person in a billion of people. So Maria, or billions, 8 billion, right? 8 billion people.
A lot.
A lot of people. Maria Montessori really believed in the power of giving children giant numbers and really big abstract concepts that were concrete. And so we've got this big abstract concept, which is we actually live on something that is not exactly a sphere, but it looks spherical.
Yeah, if you look around, it looks flat, but in reality, it's exactly.
Yeah, it's actually a very slight ellipsoid that looks spherical to our eyes.
But you have to be so high up to even begin to conceive of it.
Yeah.
That's how big it is.
It's so big. Yeah. So it's just a gift that we give children. So there is a series of globes that we do give children that help them to have these aha moments about who am I and where exactly am I. And one of the very first ones that we give is called the Land and Water Globe. It is a sand globe, so it's tactile. And I know we have one around here, but since my foot is broken, I don't have the wherewithal to dig into our closet and show you guys. But anyone who is watching here and wants to know, you can just Google Montessori Land and Water Globe and you will find it.
They're very identifiable.
They're there. So essentially it's a globe and they're usually about this size, so kind of smallish, right?
Smaller than a basketball, but
smaller than a basketball for sure. Yeah. And I don't play sports, so I don't know what kind of ball is about this size.
I don't know.
Yeah, a reasonable size, not a big globe, something unwieldy for
it's for little ones, so
it's for little ones. So
big enough to feel weighty for the little one, but not so big as
you want it to them to be able to hold it in their hands, right? Which reminds me of that song. Right? He's got the whole world in his hands. So we're literally giving children a world to hold in their hands.
That's right.
And so we've got that physical representation of the planet Earth, and we've got something for them to hold, to like possess, which is a very powerful feeling as well, to have that feeling of ownership right away. And what this globe does is it's actually kind of a sandy, scratchy,
it's like sandpapery,
for the continents, and then it's smooth and painted blue for the water on the globe. And really, there's only really like one basic concept we're teaching with this globe. So if those of you who are watching and you're wondering, is this a globe that I must have as an essential? It's actually a globe that is beautiful. It's a wonderful experience, but it's very, very short-lived.
Yeah.
So once your child understands the concept of land being that like there's land on the earth and water also being on the earth and air kind of surrounding the earth, once they understand that concept, then they're ready to move on to another globe. So it's not like a piece of Montessori equipment that's going to last a long time, but it can make for a really magical first impression. So a lot of our members in our community they like to DIY this one. And there are many ways that you can do that. So first, you might be thinking, okay, where can I get a globe on the cheap? Because it's not gonna be a lesson and a globe that's gonna last unless you have multiple children that you're introducing it to. It's not gonna last for years and years. It's like a big first impression type of globe. So you might think, okay, first I gotta get a cheap globe. Thrift stores are great for this because globes get out of date really, really quickly. Just regular student globes. And so what you can do, and what a lot of our members do, is they'll paint the whole globe blue to cover all of the political boundaries first. And then for just the continents themselves, you want it to have a texture on it, because what you're really doing is you're saying, okay, this blue part here, it's nice and smooth. this is water, and this texture feel, this tactile feel is land, right? So what can you think of that would give a texture?
Well, sandpaper.
Okay, so you could, you could trace around the continents, go get some sandpaper.
Feels kind of hard though, right?
And then cut them out and then glue them onto
I
your
guess
globe.
I'd probably paint some glue onto the land areas and then stick some sand to it or something.
A lot of families do that as well. So sand does glue pretty well. You can either you can take a paintbrush and you can paint some glue on it, and then you can just kind of shake on the sand, kind of like we do with glitter. So that's one method. You probably need to know that if you use that method, just like glitter does, you know how glitter gets everywhere? Well, the sand is going to flick off of your globe, most likely. But our parents have come up with great solutions for that as well. If you apply like a little bit of Mod Podge on top, that leaves the textury feel and it keeps the sand kind of like sticks it in there so that it's not like flaking off. Another idea, something that you could do to make your own land and water globe, is you could I'm imagining I'm almost certain people have done this, but what's on my mind is I'm going to the crafty store and they make paint that already has texture.
That's right. Yes.
Right. So you could buy some paint that's like texture paint and then dip your paintbrush in it, make sure you get some of that texture, and then just paint in the continents. Okay. I'm also thinking puffy paint.
Oh yeah, that would be real fun, right?
Right. Because it would provide a very interesting texture. It might be squishy, but it would still be texture.
Because the goal isn't like it has to be sandy versus this. The sand doesn't mean anything. It just means this is a different part of the earth.
Right. Yeah. You could also use glitter, and it will flake off and make your house beautiful as well. But whatever you do, if you're making a land and water globe, you're going to make sure that you're making the water the same color, usually blue. Makes sense to people, and that you're making the continents the same color. You're not going to decorate one blue and one red.
And I usually see it as a kind of a tan or a brown.
Usually kind of tan or brown. Yeah, it's classic. This globe works really well in conjunction with our land and water forms. So it's kind of like you might move from this concept to the concept of land and water forms, and children will know. They probably won't be able to verbalize it, but just like a child who has played with a sand and water globe that looks similar to the way the land and water forms are, will be able to make that mental transition, and those materials align, which is always pleasing for us as adults as well.
Yep.
So you want to keep things really consistent because you're focusing on the concept you're teaching is this is land, this is water, and that's it. You're not teaching the names of the continents yet.
That's a separate globe.
Yep, that's a totally separate
lesson.
Separate lesson, yeah. All you're really focusing in on is this is Earth. This is Earth. Earth is made of three things: land, water, and air. And that's it. I mean, we know that air is made up of all these molecules.
But you're teaching the principle to a very little child.
You're just focusing on that one concept, and it's probably going to happen between the age of your 2. Is this like for your young ones? So like your 2-year-old is really going to be into this. Maybe you're just turned 3-year-old. This is the lesson you're going to be giving to a child who's having their first globe experience.
So after they've been introduced to this concept of land and water and air, what comes next?
Well, you start teaching the names of them, so hopefully your child's already curious, you've grabbed their attention, you've had a sensorial impression, and so now you're ready to kind of differentiate between the different landforms, right? So we've just covered the whole globe with blue and tan or something, so all the continents look the same. Now you're going to make the continents look different from each other. There are many ways that you could do this, right? But in Montessori, the most common way we do it is by color coding them. And the same colors that are on the continent globe, which looks exactly like the land and water air globe, except that it's all smooth, and now your continents are colored, right? So you've lost the texture, you've just got different colored continents. North America is orange, and South America
is red.
Europe is red, South America is pink. I mean, it doesn't really matter that you're using the Montessori colors, but the cool thing about using very consistent colors is that your continent map will match the same color.
Yeah, so there's no magic in the fact that Europe is red. It's just that if it's red in all the other materials, it helps tie the connection in the child's mind.
Right. That's right. That's right. So, and then you're labeling them. You're pointing to them. You're giving a 3-period lesson, which we've talked about a little bit before. So you're naming them, and then you're kind of playing around with the concept. You're probably going to be doing other continent work during the same period that you're playing with the globe. So maybe you're learning more about each continent.
Perhaps the continent song.
You're learning the continent song, and this globe actually can stay through the primary years with a child for quite some time. So of the two, my pick would be the colored continent globe for families, if you're going to pick one to be your essential. And you can also DIY this one as well. So with this one, you're not going to do any texture or texture.
Because this time you're not focusing on that quality.
But you can still go get your thrift store globe. There are even some very, very cheap $9 globes on Amazon that are about the right size, And so all you do is such an easy DIY is you just paint them. And then you're going to paint the parts blue that are the water. And then you're going to paint the continents the color. So a lot of parents do is you might put a primer over it because it's probably going to have the political boundaries on it, and you don't want that part. You really only want the continent.
You're just isolating to that particular concept, which is content.
Yes. So it doesn't really matter what color you paint your continents. It does matter that they are different colors in this aspect because you're focusing on what are these, and that's the lesson you're teaching.
Now I have to ask. I mean, I know the answer already.
Do you?
But we have folks from all over the world that are in our community.
Yes.
And we all want to know, how many continents are there?
Yeah. Well, so in my part of the world, there are 7. But different countries have different opinions, right?
Exactly.
Different
cultures
have
fascinating,
different opinions.
right? So in the U.S., we do think of 7.
We do. We separate North America and South America in particular. But I have gotten comments on our YouTube channel, on the comments on YouTube in particular, where a lot of people seem to think that North America and South America were one continent.
That's right. Because that is how it's taught in certain places.
Yes. And at first it was like, what? Clearly there are 2 continents.
Right.
What is this? But in some cultures, they are taught as being one. So instead of North America, and there's a little part of Central America down there that's still part of North America, and then South America, they are taught that it's America,
right?
Just the one. So,
I think there's even a version where there are 5 continents, and Antarctica is rolled into the America.
Ooh! Yeah! Wow! And how about Asia and Europe? And,
I know Russia is always a fascinating one, right? Because which continent is in both? It's in 2. And does the Middle East go to Asia? Does it go to Africa? Is it part of Europe? Yes.
Yeah, why would we separate it there? Okay, this is Asia, but this is Europe, and it's part of it.
Totally, especially if you think back to antiquity.
Yeah.
Those cultures were all deeply linked, right?
Yes.
The Greco-Roman world, the Egyptian world, the Persian world. They were all highly linked together. They share a common background. So, why isn't that part of the map red if it's supposed to be Europe?
Right.
And much like the question of why do people think that you're going to fall off the edge of the earth, this is a very complicated question outside the purview of this particular, but I think it is actually a kind of question that your older child will start to think about. Why are continents divided the way they are?
When you start studying the continental plates, and recently we had our whole constellation unit on erupt. So we were studying volcanoes, and we studied the ring of fire. And I don't know if any of our members dabbled into, why is one continent?
Totally.
Is our continents actually real? Are they actually separate, and what makes them actual continents? What I learned recently is that New Zealand is actually its own continent.
Oh, is that right?
I mean, sort of, yeah. Scientists have just recently realized that New Zealand is, I think it's called New Zealandia or
Oh,
something.
wow.
And it's its own continental plate. So why isn't New Zealand like considered its own continent? They said actually New Zealandia, which we usually lump together with Australia. We call it Oceania, right? But this new continental plate that they have now determined and discovered, most of the land is actually just under the ocean. It's just like under the water.
That makes sense.
And so that's why when we look at a physical representation of the Earth, we wouldn't like see that continent, but geologists have determined like it is actually a continent.
So this is what's amazing, right? Because it reminds me, I remember, was it last year, a couple of years ago, they decided there was actually one additional ocean in the world.
Right.
And so this is what makes science amazing.
It is. And also going back to your topic of like unscience, like how is a continent where we visually like divide our world, or is it like the scientific discoveries that we're making about our world?
Exactly, right.
It's hard.
Yes, but not necessarily a question that a
3-year-old or a 4-year-old is asking.
Yeah, but what you might be hearing here is the thing that I love most about how Montessori approaches learning, and it's kind of like the image I have in my mind is a pie that you're slicing. And so when you are teaching the land and water, you kind of slice that pie into big chunks. Now you've introduced the idea of continents. Now I'm going to take a slice and I make it a little bit smaller, and that means like a more detailed level of information. And the last way, that we wanted to talk about that you would slice it, is a traditional student globe, which you could use through forever, right? It's just a globe. It's going to be a political.
Oh, these are the globes that you find at Target and big box stores and the like.
Yeah, so it's going to show political boundaries.
Or if you type globe into Amazon, this is probably what's going to come up.
And so a student globe is just generally a less expensive version of a political globe. It could be topographical. Those are really great.
Those are my favorites, actually. So what I really wish is that more companies would develop topographical globes that don't have the political boundaries.
Yeah.
Because I would actually put that in between. We've got our land and water globe. We've got our continent globe. And after that, I would really just like a globe that just shows where the deserts are and where the forests are.
Yeah, just to be able to rub your...
And then where the mountains
because it kind of would blend the two together.
But without having to label it, here is where, Switzerland is.
That's right.
So I would like that as an in-between. There are companies that are developing really great stuff, especially for Montessori classrooms, but I really would like to see it like popularized out in the larger culture. So if you're looking for a student globe, that would be like the next step really after map work.
And this is something you could buy very early on and just have around.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, especially if you don't have either of the other two globes, you definitely can have just a regular student globe in your home and do the same kind of lessons with them. It's just got more information on it, so it could be a little bit
overwhelming, abstract.
So if you're on the hunt for a traditional student globe, what you're going to look for is something preferably that's topographical or shows like where you can see visually that
and
like
it's the ridges,
or even if you can't feel it, like where it's like brown where the desert is and green where more forests are. Those are the kind of globes I really, really, really like for kids. And the other is if your globe is more political and you can't find a topographical or a biome focused globe, then you're just looking for simplicity. You want one that's not going to when you tap a country, like tell the child what the country is,
sometimes they sell these electronic globes,
techie globes. So no to that. Let's just get the concrete information first. I mean, and if your child is ready for that kind of techie stuff, there's plenty online that they can use.
This would be where you would transition into using.
You can.
Because that's where technology really can have a hugely beneficial impact, right? You can deep dive into something very quickly and get information But if you want to conceptualize
Yes.
something,
So, on that note, for the globe that would be ideal to me, the Google Earth version does allow you to take
yeah,
away political boundaries and just look at topographical information.
that's right.
So that would be a step in there or a substitute that you can use in lieu of a physical object. But the other thing to look for, I think, in terms of buying a student globe for that next step is contrast. So there are a lot of globes out there that are all brownie, with very pastel-y looking countries, and a ton of the names of cities and everything.
A lot
And
of
we just don't
information.
need that. I think that Google Maps and Earth work so well that if you're looking for a specific country or a name of a particular city, you could just type it in, find out generally where it is, and then you could go to your globe and you can find where it is on the globe, and kind of roughly estimate it.
Yeah, because I mean,
Right.
the value of the globe is that it gives you a approximation of space
Right.
in a way that a flat map or a digital representation will not.
Right. So I would look for continents that are more brightly colored against a bright blue sea, the
Yep.
water, as opposed to like a very, very soft pastel-y looking kind of globe.
hmm
Yeah, and some globes are cool. They have animals, common animals that are on the globe or
Yep.
the little features, and those are fun for kids. Not 100% necessary, but fun. But the main factors would be, can I tell where the deserts are and the forests are and the mountains are? And is it high contrast? So those are
Totally.
the main things. And the other thing to know about student globes is just like with the continent issue, countries are also kind of negotiable. Right. So the places on the world that are political boundaries, they often depend on the person who is making the globe, right? Or the country who's producing the globe.
That's right.
So a classic example of that would be Taiwan's relationship to China, to the mainland China. If you buy a globe that was made in China, you might find that Taiwan is very clearly part of China. And if you are a person who lives in Taiwan, you may feel very, very differently about that political
That's right.
distinction. Yeah. So, and that's just kind of one very classic example, but there's so many
Yeah.
examples,
That's right.
Israel and Palestine. And I mean, we just keep going.
Sure.
And not to mention Russia and Ukraine, and like, who knows what we're labeling all these things now. It's going to depend on your point of view. And that's actually something, I find that families get frustrated once they start looking for globes and maps that are perfect. It's really easy to look at a globe, and then the more you read about it, the more you research it, the more comments you read, the more you find that they're not perfect.
Totally. They're biased in their own way.
They are all biased. Yeah. So there's no way to find a perfect one. Even just a generic continent map, it's going to be missing some island, or it's going to be missing, and it's going to have mislabeled something or misspelled something. And it's not necessarily because there is you just needed to buy a higher quality one.
Yeah.
It really is all about the human perspective.
That's exactly right.
Which is also why we place this unit in humankind.
Exactly.
Rather than in a section called geography.
Yeah, and because as we've thought through it, the science, when physical science and in life science, there is a study of things related to biomes and things related to the globe and the Earth. But our thought is that it's the globe and the Earth as a natural entity. And when humans begin to describe it, that's when we think it moves into the world of humankind. So political geography is definitely a human endeavor.
That's right.
Because you can, as I was immensely fascinated as a child again and again when I would cross a state line, there was no line on the, I mean, it's, what? How is this? This looks exactly the same. We still find that really interesting. And that's because it's completely made up. We totally made it up.
We made it up.
And doesn't mean it doesn't have value. Doesn't mean it doesn't have currency, cultural currency. Doesn't mean that it's not important. It just means that it's not of the earth. The earth didn't make that decision.
All
It didn't like,
right.
here's the mountain.
That's a good way to describe it. So just for those of you to kind of orient you, hopefully if you have been on the Child of the Redwoods website, you have seen this in one form or another, or even on our YouTubes. But we're talking about this one right here. It says humankind, this is where we put geography. And it's because humans make these decisions, and then we're going to use these boundaries to describe our world.
Yeah, and we're just setting the child up, right? So we're focusing on 2 to 9, essentially. But, these questions about what is a political boundary? How do you describe it? How do you make a more accurate map? These are questions that adult cartographers will spend careers doing, or researchers, or people who work in the military or private sector, all over, right? We have many people have an interest in how maps are drawn and how they convey information. That's why we would say it's an essential concept. We want children to have both an understanding of what globes are and how they work, and the description, but we also want to prepare them for when they're slicing that pie even thinner and they're getting really deep and narrow into something specific.
Yeah.
They've got the background that lets them ask those questions.
That's right. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up, friends. Thank you so much for sharing this time with us. So this was the last of the essentials.
I know.
What are we going to do next?
Don't worry, we have a brand new series. It's called Amazing Lessons.
Amazing Lessons. So come back.
So we're going to be highlighting some of our favorite lessons from the Montessori world, and that will start next week.
Yes, it will. All right. See you next Tuesday at 1.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.